We're going to start our learning by talking about how feedback moves the learning forward. Now, I have a very, very clear image of what feedback is, and that is the paper that I got back from my teacher in middle school or in high school, and there are comments written all over it with a red pen. And yes, it was a red pen. Now, I know that most teachers don't use red pens anymore, but I do know that many teachers put lots and lots of comments on paper, and we think of that as feedback. I want to sort of tweak our thought, tweak what we think about as feedback, because a lot of times that feedback that we're providing for a student is after the fact. The paper is finished, so now I fill it full of feedback, but the learning is done. So how does that feedback actually impact what is going on with the student? This first kind of step in this feedback and data module is to think about feedback as something that continuously moves the learning forward, and something that helps students know what comes next. I want to draw your attention to this illustration that I have right here. And this illustration is meant to kind of demonstrate what learning could look like for students. So we have a learning target. All students start at the very same learning target. That would be a standard, the learning target. And we all end at some sort of a demonstration of learning. But if you look at this illustration, you see that there are several different colors of paths. We have a gray one, we have a blue one, a red one, and a pinkish purple one. Each of those, the gray path is kind of the way that the teacher expected the learning to go, from the learning target to the demonstration of learning. But all the other paths wind and cross and go round and round. Those are what actually happens through the learning process with students. Now you'll notice that I added a couple other things here, and one of them is a picture of two people talking. That is to represent some sort of feedback. Now, I use the teacher-student feedback, but it could be student to student. It could be students to self. So any kind of feedback is sort of represented by that two people talking. Then there's also an icon that is like a computer screen with a magnifying glass, and that's any time that we're gathering data. You'll notice that generally that feedback is close to a data. And what's happening is, in this model, to illustrate our kind of the perfect idea, is that each time that there is some sort of a feedback conversation, some sort of feedback in documentation, there's also some data that comes from that. And then the path changes, because based on what we know a student knows, we change the path for that student. Now, I would like to suggest that that's a partnership. It's not just the teacher changing the path for the student, but the student begins to own the learning more and more, and they are part of this changing path.